Hi everyone, I'm Rouben Meschian. I'm a programmer, teacher, kickboxer, dancer, father, a million other things. I want to share with you some mistakes that I've made in my professional life, which I think a lot of you will be able to identify with. But before I do that, let me roll the clock back a bit. Let me go all the way back to December 3rd, 1980, the day of my first fuck-up. I managed to disappoint both of my parents by being born a boy rather than a girl, as they were expecting. So I entered this world as a fuck-up, if you will. And so it continued from there. So 7 years later, my parents decided to send me to school. This is the Soviet Union, so the good schools were the Russian schools. So he sent me to a Russian school, great, but they forgot to teach me Russian. My teacher was Russian. She didn't speak Armenian at all and didn't care. So I went to school not knowing the language that everyone else was speaking. This was horrible. The grading system at the time for the young people out back was between 5 and 1. 2 is what they would give you if you were already a fuck-up. Like 2 is when they would pull you aside, have a conversation with you. You're failing, you're not doing well. 2 is a problem. I was getting 1s. They don't give out 1s to just anyone. You have to be a major problem to get 1s. That's what I was getting. So this lasted for about a year and a half, and then we moved to Boston, to the United States, where my parents sent me to school again, but I didn't speak English. So that was fantastic too. So I went to school not speaking English, but the problem there is not only could I not speak with the teacher, I couldn't even speak with the students. And I don't know what it's like to live in Armenia, guys, but let me tell you, students in the US, young children are horrible people. Horrible, mean people. I was getting in fights all the time, right? So I was basically in survival mode. I wasn't growing, I wasn't learning, it wasn't like an enriching educational experience for me. School for me was about survival. Go, survive, go home, forget it ever happened, go again the next day if you have to. Skip if you can, run away if possible. So this was great, right? You can see where I'm going with this. So this lasted for a while, and then finally I picked up English. This took about maybe 2 years until I became somewhat fluent in English. But the problem is I had almost trained myself to be like a survivalist at school. School for me was not about learning. I wasn't paying attention to the teacher. My goal was to be invisible in school. I knew just where to sit so that the teacher wouldn't see me, right? I was quiet, I wouldn't talk much. My goal was to be unnoticeable to anybody. Do that and run away at the end of the day. And the problem is I had trained myself to do this so well that even after I learned English, this continued, right? So this continued until 6th grade. Okay, so that's 6 years of my life, guys, that I learned basically how to survive, but not anything else. Okay, so it was towards the end of 6th grade when my father noticed my grades. Now, I think my mom maybe was hiding them from him or something. I don't know why it took so long for him to notice, but he noticed. And I heard from the other room, "Rouben!" I'm like, shoot. He's about to have that talk. You know the talk that parents have? So I go, like, "Hi." He goes, "Sit down." I go, "Okay." So I sit down. And my father has actually a very calm conversation with me, which was really surprising. I was expecting him to get mad and angry and yell and "What are you doing? You're right." It was actually a very calm conversation. And basically he said this. He said, "Look, we didn't come from Armenia all the way to the United States so you can work at a gas station. Get your act together, start getting good grades so you can get a good university, get a good job, and become successful." Basically, he said, success is not an option for you. You have to be successful. It's that simple. And I said, well, okay. I mean, what else do you say to that, right? Okay, so I said, okay. And I went back to school and I kind of started paying attention. I started actually listening to the teacher and trying to figure out what the hell that teacher was saying, right? And to my surprise, my grades went up. And after that, I basically had all A's, like straight A's in everything. And this was cool, right? Everyone was so happy and so proud of me. The teachers loved me. My parents were happy every time they would get the grades. Palm, high five, right? This was great. I was getting fantastic grades. Now this is good, right? It's not bad to be a good student. But here's the fuck up. After a while, my goal was not about learning the content. I was optimizing my education to get good grades. My goal was the A, not the value of the knowledge that meant the A. Now there's a problem with this. When you optimize your life, when you optimize your education for the A, for the grade, you end up losing a lot, number one. Number two, the second thing that happens is that when you focus on the A, you begin to be afraid of failure. Now for those of you, actually all of you know this, education is about failure. It's about fucking up, right? You fuck up, you learn from it. You have to not be afraid of making mistakes. It's the mistakes that you learn from, right? I was afraid of making mistakes because I wouldn't get the A. Okay, so I optimized everything to get the A. But the problem with that is I got nervous about failing. So I became very bad at taking tests. So here's what happened. I was a straight A student. I was an athlete. I wrestled, I played tennis, I did martial arts all my life. I was the president of this club and whatever of this club. On paper, I was perfect. But everything was optimized to look good on paper, right? So then I had to take the SATs, right? The entrance exams to university. And again, paralyzed with fear, I did not that well on the exam. I did okay, I did well, but not very well. And here's the thing. The whole time I was studying, because I was a star student, everyone was telling me, I need to go to Harvard, I need to go to Princeton. I'm like the A grade material, right? I'm gonna go to like the best university ever. Furthermore, I was very good at biology. I mean, I love a lot of things, actually. I was pretty good at different things, but I loved biology. And so everyone was like, oh, you have to be a doctor. It's like every parent's dream, right? Is for their child to be a doctor, son, daughter, whatever. So I'm like, yes, I'm going to go to Harvard and be a doctor. Right? This was like my vision of life. I got my exams back, and they weren't that good. And here's the thing. When you go on like the Harvard University website, in like their entrance area, it says like the minimum requirement to get into the university. Mine was below that. It was like slightly below, but below. Now, logic tells you, if you have logic, don't bother even trying to go to a university if you scored less than the minimum, right? But this was another fuck up. I was so busy listening to the stories being told by other people that I failed to use my own head when making this decision. I was told you're going to go to Harvard. I was told you're going to be a doctor, and I just went with that flow. I didn't think for myself. The decision to become a doctor and the decision to then go to Harvard and go through that whole pipeline was actually not mine. The decision was made by the stories that were told to me by my teachers and others that I looked up to. It was not my decision at the end of the day. And the failure that resulted from this was actually in my favor. So let me explain. Naturally, I applied to Harvard. Naturally, of course. I applied to Princeton, I applied to Yale, I applied to like a lot of the really top schools. And then, just as a backup, just in case, I applied to this other school called Boston University. It's a pretty good university. It's not a bad university, but it's not, Harvard. So I applied to all these universities, and pretty soon I start getting these letters, and they're thin. And for those of you who have applied to like universities, if you get a thin letter, it's not good news. The thick ones are the good ones, right? So I started getting all these thin letters, and they all say, thank you for applying, but you suck, right? So I kept getting them, and I kept getting them, and basically I got rejected from every one of these top schools because my exams, my SAT exams, did not match their minimum. Why did I even bother applying and wasting my time? Because I listened to the stories told by others. I was so busy listening to the stories, I failed to use my own head. The only school I got into was Boston University, the last one, my safety school. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I should skip a year, and I got into this panic, like, oh, I worked so hard, and everyone was telling me I'm supposed to go to Harvard, like, what the hell, right? Okay, but my parents were like, look, make the best of it, go to this university, it's a good university, they have a very good pre-med program, go get the job done, go become a doctor and kick ass. Yes, gonna go become a doctor. So when I got into Boston University, the one thing that I didn't understand was how expensive it was gonna be. I got a bill. Boston University at the time was like $35,000 a year or something like that. Now, you can get financial aid, right? But for financial aid, you have to apply, and there's a deadline. And you have to apply by a certain deadline in order for them to even consider you. I don't know how, I missed the deadline. My students, raise your hands. Do you know how bad I am about deadline? Like, if you miss 1 second, I give you an F, right? Where does that come from? Because I fucked up on the same thing. Deadlines fucking matter, guys. You have to meet the deadlines. I missed the deadline. And for that, I was stuck with a $35,000 bill. Holy shit, I didn't have $35,000. You don't know, my parents had no money, like nothing. They were in the negatives. Like, how am I gonna pay $35,000 to go to a school that I didn't even want to go to, right? I applied to like every scholarship. I wrote like every Armenian scholarship you can imagine. I wrote that. None of them responded. No one cared. So my parents are like, look, we don't care. Your education is the most important thing. We'll take out loans from the bank, whatever. You have to go to school. Okay. So anyway, eventually we did what I could. I brought it down as much as I could, and I went. So here I am going to university to become a doctor. I did this for about a year. I was in the pre-med program, majoring in biology, getting ready to become a doctor, right? A year after, I realized, look, I love biology. I love chemistry, I love helping people, all of this is great. But I also love lots of other things. I want to be in business someday, right? I want to work for the government someday and do some good, there are other things I want to do. I don't want to live my entire life in a hospital. It's a great living, it's great to help you, but it's not for me. I can't just do that. I want to do that and more. So I got into a panic, an absolute panic. What the heck do? I changed my major to international relations for a semester. It was great, but I realized I'm never going to get a job doing that. Got out of that. I tried a few other things, and eventually I was like, look, I can't decide. Oh my God, my parents put all this money into me. I put all this time and investment into getting into a university, and I'm in the middle of it, and I have no idea what to do. Holy shit, right? What do I do? So this was about the time of the dot-com boom, right? This is when like IT was becoming interesting. And one thing that I noticed after talking to a lot of people is that computers were everywhere. They were in every industry, right? No matter what office you went to, whether it was a doctor's office or a bank, they had a computer, right? So I thought, oh, this is interesting. If I study computers, whatever that means, maybe I can work in all these different places. So I opened, the curriculum, and there was computer science. I had no idea what computer science meant. All I knew was it was computers. I thought I was going to be learning like Word and Excel. I literally had no idea what computer science was. So I changed my major to computer science, and next semester I go to the first class. It was basically like Intro to Computer Science, the thing I teach now. I went, and everyone in the class was smarter than me. Everyone in the class already knew how to program. Everyone in the class had already taken some other classes. Basically, I was the idiot in the class, once again. You notice a pattern here, by the way? I don't know if you, okay, all right. So, everyone knows how to program. The teacher assigns a problem set, write a code that does this. Everyone's like, Palm, no problem. And I go, and first of all, I turned on the computer at the university, and it's like this weird, cursor. I'm used to Windows where you double click on icons. It was a Unix operating system with a console. You had to know the commands to type. I didn't even know what Unix was at the time. I didn't know what an operating system was. I just knew that a computer came with a thing that said Word on it when it turned on. That's all I knew. Okay, so I spent this semester attempting to catch up, and I fail. There's a deadline for when you can drop a class. As I'm approaching that deadline, I realize, oh my God, I'm going to completely fail this class. I'm going to lose any chance of getting a scholarship and bringing that price, that $35,000 price down. If I get an F, I'm screwed. So what do? I drop the class, but I continue going. I finish the semester without credit. I just finish it. And next semester, I take it again. The same class. One more time, after basically failing it the first time, right? So I take the class again the second time, and this time, somehow, I managed to get a B+, right? And I hated programming. I don't know about you guys. I do know, I have students. Programming, when you first start doing it, sucks. No one likes it. It's I don't know what it's like. It's horrible. It's a bad experience. And this was the experience for me, and I hated it. And I was like, oh my God, is this what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life? But I made my decision, I'm doing it, whatever, go. So it took me quite a while to become somewhat comfortable with programming. I took many more classes, and I spent a lot of time. I was basically writing code in front of a computer all day, from morning till night. I would go home, say hi to my parents, go to sleep, wake up next morning, go back to the lab, and start working. This is how I spent every day, including Saturdays and Sundays. I had no life, I was a nerd. Okay. So this happened for a while, but then eventually I got comfortable, and I'm like, yes, I need a job. Okay. So, what do you do when you're a programmer and you're studying computer science? Well, no one will hire you full-time, right? You have no experience. You're an idiot at the time, right? So, okay, internship. That's what I need. So I started applying to different companies. I'm like, look, hire me. They're like, no, you don't have any experience. I'm like, I'll work for free. No, we have to pay you to feel like we're expecting something back. We have a policy. We have to pay every employee. Even if I'm an intern, yes, sorry, no. Everyone was saying no. I'm like, I will work for you for free. I will come during the summer, morning till night, be your slave. Just take me. No, no one's hiring me. So what did I do? I went on Craigslist, which is like List AM. It's like the same thing. So I went on List AM, basically, the US List AM, and I looked around and I find this, there's a startup that's looking for a programmer. And they don't pay anything. I'm like, perfect, job for me. So I go and I meet this guy at a Starbucks, and he's like this sort of hippie, like, hey, dude. I'm like, hey, I'm here for programming. Oh, cool, man. It's like one of these experiences. Anyway, and I don't know how, the guy's like, okay, you're hired. I'm going to give you like 0.0001% of the company. I'm going to pay you nothing, and you're going to work for me for free. I'm like, perfect, I got the job. Okay, so I get this job and I'm very excited. I'm going to be working with this team, and I realize I'm basically the only programmer on the team. I'm like, okay. I'm like, whatever, but it's a startup, I'm going to do this. We're going to build a startup. I'm going to make millions. This is going to be amazing. And so I spent the next year and a half, almost 2 years, working all day writing code for this company. I would go to class and then go and write code for the company. Go to class, go write code for the company. We had no office, I just had a laptop. And I was writing code all day. I learned .NET, nice new program. It was a new programming, C#, sorry. It was a new programming language at the time, but I knew Java. Picking it up was no problem. So I learned C# and I did that for a year and a half, almost 2. Did it, and eventually I get like a phone call from the guy. He's like, hey, we're not moving forward. We're just going to shut down. I was like, wait, what? I just spent a year and a half all day writing code for you, and you're going to throw it away? No! Yes. So, a year and a half of killing myself writing code for this company went down the toilet. But one advantage is I now had some experience, so then I applied to an internship at IBM, and I got in. And it was really cool because I got into this group called AdTech, Advanced Technologies Group at IBM. And this was like a badass team. Like these guys were awesome. This was the team that the rest of the IBM, like when the software group had a problem, they would go to this team to find a solution, prototype the solution, give it back to them, then they would productize it. Right? This was like the think tank. They were awesome. I was, again, the dumbest person in the room. Anyway, so I'm there and I feel like a total idiot. Every day I would go, I was nervous, I was sweating, every day I was like, why did they hire me? I'm an idiot, everyone here is smarter than me, like everyone must be laughing at the stuff that I'm doing. What am I even doing here? And I spent the next year feeling like this, like a complete moron. Everyone there was like from Harvard, from Princeton. They were all like from Ivy League schools. They had many years of experience. There was a securities expert. There was an expert in systems. There were people who were experts in networks. There were like really badass programmers in this team, and me. So this happened for a while. And then altogether, I was there for about 3 years, and we developed some pretty cool solutions. After a while, I started sort of, feeling like I kind of get some of what they're doing, but not really. But about then is when I left the company and I joined a startup that was actually spun out of IBM. So we open sourced some of the stuff, and then based on the open source projects, we ended up building a company around that. I was the first engineer of that team. And we built actually something pretty cool. I don't want to get into the technology, but it was a cool technology. It was basically a graph-based database, distributed, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Cool technology. Let me explain about this fuck up. And this is really important for those of you who are doing startups. We thought that we had created an amazing technology, and we did. It was a very cool technology. And we wasted maybe 2 years at least, maybe even 3 years, trying to sell technology to customers, and failed miserably. Why, you ask? Let's go through the thought exercise of one might fail when selling technology to businesses. First, who is your client? Is it the CEO of the, let's say you're selling to a bank, right? Are you selling to the CEO of the bank? Well, no, the CEO doesn't care about technology. The CEO is a business person, right? So, no. Are you selling to the CTO? Well, actually, no. The CTO oversees the high-level stuff, but the low-level technical decisions are made by the programmers and the IT department, right? I mean, the low-level stuff. They're the ones who actually have to integrate the solution, use the solution, maintain the solution. All of that has to be done at the lower level. So the sysadmins are the ones who you're really talking to when you're selling infrastructure, right? Okay, now imagine you're a sysadmin, and I come to you and I'm like, hey, I'm Rouben, and I have this awesome technology. No. Okay, I'm going to sell you this awesome solution. And you're like, I've never heard of you. So let me get this straight. You want me to learn what you're doing, spend all the work of bringing it into our, installing it into our infrastructure, maintain it, make sure that it's secure, hire possible additional engineer and service providers to maintain that solution, all so that, what? Why am I doing all this extra work? Basically, get the fuck out, is what they would tell us. Over and over. No one wants to do more work just for the sake of doing more work. So when you sell technology, be very careful about who you're selling it to. Because if you're selling it to people who are just going to end up doing more work, they're not going to want you. That's the wrong approach. So after failing like this for about 2 or 3 years in sales, we decided, you know what, we need to sell to the different person. Who's the person who actually makes all the decisions in the company? Who's the top? The CEO. What do you sell to the CEO? You can't sell the CEO a database. They don't care about a database. What you need to sell to the CEO is a solution to a problem that they have. So we thought, well, actually the system that we have, it's useful as a software, as a technology, but it solves the problem of understanding data. Okay? So our solution was all about helping people understand their data. So you have lots of data spread out in different databases. How do you collect it together and make sense of it? This was sort of the solution that we came up with, and we built additional software around the technology. And what we ended up doing is going back to the same banks and the same pharmaceutical companies and trying to sell them not a technology, but a solution to a problem that they had. And when you show someone who has a hard problem the solution, they will just give you money immediately. And that's nice. So that's how Cambridge Semantics started to grow, and lots of great things happened from there. Yeah. Actually, that's pretty much the gist of it. So other than that, I'm a programmer. I teach sometimes at AUA. It's fun. That's actually most of the fuck-ups I wanted to talk about today. Does anyone have any questions?
Դրսում աշխատած լինելով այստեղի նոր սկսնական մի քիչ ավելի փորձառու ծրագրավորողներին ինչ խորհուրդ կտայիք?
Okay, so an important fuck-up that I have to tell you about. So I'm a programmer, right? So that means full-time I'm basically writing code, right? So my contribution to the company, to the world, is code, right? Characters, files. 90, maybe 95, maybe even 99% of everything that I've written in my life has been thrown away. Can you imagine that? Now one can think, wow, you wasted like 99% of your life. Right? You could think of it that way, and actually maybe you would be right. Because if you're spending all day coding and 99% of that doesn't work and you throw it away, well then in a way you have wasted 99% of your, logically, yes? But, and here's the but, that 1 to 5% that has actually been used and gone to production and has been useful to companies and the people and whatever, I would make the argument that that 5% would not exist, and certainly would not exist in that quality, if the 95% garbage did not exist underneath it. Yeah? So what does this mean? That means that if you plan on working or you plan on growing as a programmer, you have to be prepared to write a lot of code, number one. And the more you do it, the better you become at it. This is kind of a rule in programming, number one. But number two, you have to understand that all the code that you're going to write, most of it you're going to throw away. And I'll add this, a lot of it you yourself will throw away. You will look at it and go, and rewrite it, or just throw it away because you don't need it, or whatever, right? So if there's one thing I can tell you as a programmer, it's this. First of all, be humble. Most of what you create is garbage. And if you don't believe me, you yourself will find out soon. And that's okay. It's okay to create garbage. Because creating garbage is how you make the successful code at the end. Yeah? If you create code that's not amazing and you read it later and you're like, what the? Rewrite it. And if you have the unit test to make sure that what you changed is correct, no problem. You can do it and you know that what you changed is correct, right? So have unit tests. Automated tests are a good thing. So in general, just write code. The more you do it, the better. All those late nights when you're not sleeping, when you're not eating, when you're skipping lunch because you're so connected, you're thinking of an algorithm and you're typing it in, all of that is making you better, right? So even if all of that gets scraped away, if you get fired at the end, the company goes under, all the code gets thrown away, all of that has made you better, and future code will benefit from those mistakes. Yeah? So just write code as much as you can. Yeah? Cool. Yeah, question. Yes. Ari. Here, use mine.
Շատ շնորհակալ ենք կիսվելու համար փորձով։ Մի հատ հարց, որ դուք պատմեցիք, որ վախենում եք failure-ից, վախենում եք mistake-ներից, գտնում եք հիմա արդեն այդ լրիվ overcome եք արել, թե այդ habit-ը դեռ մնում է like throughout your life։ Ու եթե մարդիկ կան, հա, որ իրոք այդ խնդիրը ունեն, like to be perfect on paper, to be good for parents, for society, etc. How to overcome that? Some tips to share, maybe some emotional aspects that will be helpful, I guess.
Wow, it's a very good question, actually. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, have I completely overcome it? No, I don't think it's possible to completely I would be lying to you if I told you that I'm okay with failure. I understand that it's a part of life. I understand that you learn from it, but let's face it. No matter how much you're ready for it, failure still sucks, right? If I spend a week working on a piece of code and at the end it just gets thrown away because it sucks, I'm not happy about it, right? That sucks. That's life. That's hours. That's time. That's sweat. That's, time I could have spent salsa dancing, right? Like that's part of my life that has been wasted, right? So failure is never a good thing in itself, right? It's never a fun experience. But I think it's important to be able to zoom out and sort of see things in context. And I think if there's one thing I've learned over the past years is just to be able to try to zoom out. It still sucks, it's still not fun, it's still not easy to fail, but if you can sort of step back and sort of see it in a bigger picture, you can it makes more sense. So I would say that. As far as like how to get other people to overcome, I don't know, I don't know. I don't have the answer. I'm not a guru, I don't know. See a therapist, I don't know. Someone smarter than me. Next question. That's it? Վայ, մի հատ էլ։
Երկրորդ հարցն էլ իսկ որպես developer ձեզ համար ով է ամենաիդեալական project manager-ը կամ որն է ձեր համար ամենաիդեալական կամ լավ տարբերակը թիմի։
So an ideal management environment or an ideal team, I guess was, okay, I mean, I can say the easiest thing. Working with really, really smart people. Here's the thing. There are people who are very hardworking. There are people who are very excited about the project, right? And in every team, it's important to maybe have those, right? To people who are excited, motivated, whatever. But at the end of the day, nothing replaces knowledge. It doesn't matter how motivated you are. It doesn't matter how much you're willing to hit your head against the wall. If you don't have knowledge, your project will not move forward. There is no substitute for knowledge. And knowledge only comes from torture, basically. The more you force your brain to work and think and come up with new things and fuck up and solve it again, right? The better your brain starts to, right? Until then, you're not going to gather the knowledge. So my ideal team is to work with knowledgeable people. There's no substitute. It doesn't matter whether you're using agile or what kind of methodology you're using in a team, or whether you have like 1 QA and 5 developers, or you have like a manager. None of that actually matters. What matters is that you work with people who are knowledgeable, and ideally work with people who are like decent people who understand each other, right? Communication is also important. But if you have those, actually everything else is secondary. It doesn't matter if you're using Jira or if you're using some sort of other ticketing system. These are all sort of tools that are good, but the fundamental remains fundamental. It's all about people. And it doesn't matter if you're all sitting in the same room, or you're on a distributed team, or someone is in Australia, none of that matters. Just get yourself surrounded. One thing I learned, try to be the dumbest person in the room. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Fair? Okay. Other questions? Hajan.
Փորձով քանի որ ավելի մեծ փորձ ունես, մի հատ հարց ունեմ, ոնց հասկանաս կոդը լավ է գրած, թե չէ, որովհետև տարբերակները միլիոն են։ Շատ կսնակի համար։
Շատ լավ հարց ես տալիս։ Okay, so how do you sort of measure the quality of your code? Okay, so one thing that I found is that generally speaking, by the way, for those of you who are not programmers, I'm sorry, but just deal with it. Okay. Generally speaking, there's a very strong correlation between the size of your solution and how good it is. If you can do the same thing smaller, very often that's better than the bigger version. Smaller generally means more elegant, right? Number one. Second, it makes it more readable. The less code you write, the more readable it is, right? So in my opinion, what the quality of the code is very much determined by its readability. How easy is it for someone else, not you, someone else to look at your code and understand it? If you write something like this, that is harder to understand than if you write something like this, right? Just logically. I mean, it's less lines to debug, right? So writing less and within that context, making it as readable as possible is to me what defines how, because here's the thing. Now you might say, well, what about bugs? What about mistakes? If your code is readable, in other words, it's easy to understand, you will have fewer bugs. Bugs happen when your code is complicated. Complexity is what leads to mistakes. When you keeps things simple, the probability of making mistakes doing something simple is less than the probability of making mistakes when you're doing something complicated. Fair? So the solution is very simple. Make sure that your code is readable, and you can test this. Just give it to another engineer. Be like, tell me what this does. And the second, if you're curious about comparing two pieces of code, like which is better, smaller is usually better. Usually. Because it's easier to read, and readability is what leads to quality. Okay?
Keep it simple.
Merci.